Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 4, Episode 31. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. As many of you already know, I don't care about the Olympics, and yet I'm going to have a segment on this week's episode about the Olympics. The controversy, if you can call it that, surrounding the opening ceremony. And I'm actually going to promote a television program, one that I've probably been long remiss in watching, The Boys on Amazon Prime. Your next binge watch. Thank you all for listening. If you are new to the program, if you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1, the tone-deaf opening ceremony for the 2024 Summer Olympic Games.
As longtime listeners of the show well understand, I don't care about the Olympics. I get to make this comment once every 2 years, given the way the Olympics are scheduled. They happen every 4 years, and yet they now stagger the games so that you're getting an Olympic Games every 2 years, one being summer and then the other alternately being winter. In the immortal words of Smokin' Jay Cutler, don't care. Yet two things came to my attention. Those two things being worthy of commenting on this podcast. One being the fact that Gojira played in the opening ceremony. The second being that there was a trans or drag queen style rendering of The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. Because I'm old and ignorant, I thought both of these things were fake. Let's start first with Gojira playing the opening ceremony of the 2024 Summer Games in Paris, France. For all of you who do not know, Gojira is a French heavy metal band. They play a more dense technical style, and it's more of the darker death metal style that you get out of Northern Europe, Sweden and Norway. As a heavy metal fan, I was never a real fan of Gojira. I like a few of their songs. I like a few of their songs a lot. But most of their material, it just didn't resonate with me. Gojira has been around for a long time. The band changed its name. I think the band was actually named a different name in the mid-90s and then changed their name to Gojira in like 2000 or 2001. I've seen Gojira live numerous times with other bands that I wanted to go and see. They were one of the bands on a marquee, so I have seen them live, and they execute very well for what they do. Like I said, what they do does not necessarily resonate with me. One of the things that I'm now coming to love about the internet, this internet age that we live in, is that everything is fake. And when you understand that everything is fake, some of the stuff that you see you can take tongue-in-cheek, and it's actually humorous, if not insightful and thought-provoking. One of the types of fake videos that I like is taking some sort of event and then interposing music that's completely inappropriate for that event, as if the participants in the event were listening to that music. There are a number of heavy metal channels that will interpose heavy metal music into events that, just by way of 5 or 10 seconds of the visuals, you realize that's not a heavy metal environment. These are not heavy metal people. So I start getting people who are sending me clips of this heavy metal band that's playing the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and I'm thinking to myself, someone has cleverly injected a heavy metal band, oh look, it's Gojira, into the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. Turns out, Gojira is playing as part of the opening ceremony in the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. I enjoyed it for what it was, the 3 minutes of entertainment that it provided, and then I completely forgot about it. Earlier this week, I start to see some of these comment videos in the recommended content that you get on YouTube, and it's all of this commentary about the satanic nature of the opening ceremonies for the 2024 Summer Olympics. And so, naturally, I think the Puritans didn't like the Gojira. Oh, those wacky Puritans. They are quick to jump the gun. If you know anything about Gojira, Their lyrics are generally not satanic, not religiously inspired. Many of them are more politically inspired, and they do a lot of songs about the environment, like an environmentally conscious metal band. I'm not going to go so far as to say they're like Tool, that if they deal with religious concepts, it's more in a spiritual way. But given that I don't know their catalog that well, they may very well have some songs that are challenging religious orthodoxy, but I know they do have some songs that are spiritual in their nature, dealing with the mortality of our existence on this planet, and perhaps the fact that there is something eternal about us that will extend beyond this materialistic existence. Without going on into too much of a tangent, Gojira, evidently now, is part of some kind of satanic theme to the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, and I wrote it off. Then I started seeing videos about the satanic and blasphemous recreation of the Last Supper, the painting by the famous artist Leonardo da Vinci. Remember, dear listener, I don't care about the Olympics. I certainly don't care about the opening ceremony, and I had no awareness whatsoever of what had gone on in that opening ceremony. And because I am, and I say this with a sense of pride, I say this with a sense of intention, I'm the last guy to know, even on the internet, it turns out that there was some sort of drag queen type trans representation of the Last Supper during the ceremony. And by the time that I was aware that this was part of this controversy, trying to qualify the opening ceremonies of the Olympics as satanic, the Olympic Committee and NBC, they decide to take down that portion of the video that was part of the opening ceremony. So it's not readily available on YouTube. In fact, you have to go to channels that are republishing stills of that representation, because the organizers and the people who have the license to broadcast the ceremonies, they took that content down. So, of course, you go to the place where you can see practically anything, and that's Twitter. And so I did some Twitter. I did some Twittering. And there it was, in stark contrast to what I thought it would be. I really thought that this whole thing was going to be blown out of proportion, the next thing that could be spun out on the 24 or 48 hour news cycle. But sure enough, it was as it was represented. There were a bunch of drag queens who were in some sort of motley crew that looked like it was trying to recreate Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. The organizers of this Olympic Games come out and start in with the inclusion thing. Well, we wanted to have everybody represented and we wanted to have inclusion. And then you had the, and I'm going to use the word because that's the word that they used, but I don't really think it is appropriate. The artist that put together this opening ceremony. And the reason why I'm reluctant to use the word artist is that word, that qualifier, that label, it's starting to get to be the same to me as the word racist. It's thrown around so much now that it's lost all of its meaning, and there really doesn't seem to be any bar to entry. Anyone can be assigned this word, and it's a label with no real meaning. So the artist starts in about his inclusion as well, and how anybody and everybody in France can think the things they want to think, and they can do the things that they want to do, and they can love the people that they want to love. And I was watching this, and I was thinking to myself, that makes perfect sense, but you haven't justified in any way, shape, or form why you would need to recreate the Last Supper with people who were in drag or people who were trans. There's a logical chasm there that you need to have trans people and people of the LGBTQ community represented in a recreation of the Last Supper to demonstrate inclusivity. You could have trans people and you could have drag queens do anything. You have a completely open and blank palette. Why that? I better understood why there were some people crying out that this was a satanic opening ceremony. I don't necessarily agree with that. Again, Gojira is a French heavy metal band that's been around for about 25 years. I didn't watch, but that 7-minute clip that had Gojira in it, and there were glow sticks aplenty. So you had your EDM represented, and you had your classical music represented. I am not afraid of the F chord of an electric guitar. So I'm not going to immediately jump to the conclusion that there was some sort of satanic overture in including Gojira in the opening ceremony. And I'm not even going to come to the same conclusion about this trans or this drag queen rendition of The Last Supper. It's just tone deaf. And I'm going to say this even about Gojira. It's tone deaf. What I'm about to say is very well known in the world of television, in the world of television broadcasting, television advertising. This is a well-known, a known quantity. The Olympics is a feminine event. This is an event where the woman can take the remote control out of the man's hand and say, we're watching this over the course of the next 16 days. If you've listened to the show for longer than a year, you've heard me say this numerous times. If you want to know who else is watching the program that you're watching, look at the ads. Look at the advertisements. The Olympics is a white, middle to upper middle class female event. The numbers bear that out. For years, many of the legacy events in the Olympics were not televised except for rebroadcasts because they weren't events that appealed to a feminine audience. They weren't events that appealed to a suburban audience. They weren't events that appealed to a middle class or an upper middle class educated audience. I don't care about the Olympics. I don't really care about many of the sports in the Olympics, and the sports that I do care about are generally not going to be televised. And given all of the goofy sports now that have come into the Olympic Games, both in the summer and the winter, and the fact that they're still trying to push the Olympics as a national medal count, I just don't care. I don't care. But there are people who do care. And that's the reason why NBC has paid umpteen $billion to have the exclusive rights to televise the Olympics. And you need to cater to the audience that is going to watch that product because you've paid that much money. You want a return on that investment. The Disney Acolyte series is still an aftertaste in my mouth. And here you have the Olympics in what appears, what presents to be a completely tone-deaf opening ceremony. Sure, someone like me looks at a 3, a 5, a 7-minute clip that includes Gojira and says, yeah, that's pretty cool. I haven't looked at the Olympics otherwise since I saw that clip. But for the other clip that I watched of a bunch of transvestites or cross-dressers or whatever the hell they were in a 50-second clip recreating The Last Supper. Why do these organizations seem so hell-bent on pissing off the people who are the lion's share of the money that they're going to generate with their attention? It defies all logic. It defies every principle of business that any one of us has ever been taught or has experienced or has employed in order to garner some sort of success in a career, whether that be financial or emotional. With ideology as the prime mover, these organizations, Disney, the Olympic Committee, seem hell-bent on pissing off their own audience. I'm wondering out loud again if we're in like 1968 or 1969 where a lot of this stuff is coming to a head. And although there are people out there who think that this is necessary to make these points, that this needs to become part of the mainstream, what we're going to see, in my mind, and I believe it's happening now, is the mainstream is going to withdraw. To use entertainment as a platform to shove ideology down someone's throat, that is the attitude of a spoiled, entitled brat. And when the money dries up, you're going to see a turnaround. You're going to see some of these organizations turn back to the kind of programming that allowed them to garner the kind of money to acquire the rights to a Star Wars. You're going to see pressure being put on by the networks to have a more family-friendly, a more suburban upper middle class type opening ceremony for the Olympics. But it's not 1968. It's not 1969. The difference between then and now is that everyone had to come back. When the networks deviated, when they strayed and the people turned away, then they came back with programming that people wanted. The people came back because there was really nowhere else to go. That's not the case today. There are other places that people can go, namely social media, namely the streaming services. As progressive as the social media landscape is, who knows where it's going to be in the next 5 years, I believe we're seeing the same type of change in institutional or legacy entertainment. Some of these names and some of these brands that have been iconic in the United States for decades are going to be gone. They're going to go the way of Sears and Roebuck. They're going to go the way of Circuit City. You can't generate billions and billions of dollars appealing to some jackass 50-year-old with a podcast who's going to look at a 3-minute clip of Gojira in an opening ceremony that he otherwise didn't care about for an Olympics that he would never watch. You certainly can't piss down the back of a planet full of Christians in a vain and selfish attempt to try to create an inclusive message, which for an artist, any real artist, just presents as lazy and trifling and poorly inspired. Asterisk at the end of this piece, I'm going to keep an eye on over the course of the next several months and see what amount of money the city of Paris lost hosting these Olympic Games. I'm going to keep an eye on the amount of money that NBC lost given the billions they paid out for broadcast rights to these Olympic Games. In the new world of media, I don't think the cachet of either of these, a city hosting the Olympics or a network broadcasting the Olympics, is going to outweigh the amount of money that they're going to lose given the terrible decisions they've made on promoting the brand itself.
Act 2. Start watching The Boys on Amazon Prime.
I don't like a lot of TV shows. I'm pretty critical of both television and movies because I think most of it's crap. I've seen a number of actors say this, but the most recent from memory is Cillian Murphy, and he was talking about his career not only in television but in movies. And if you don't know who Cillian Murphy is, start watching better television shows and movies. Cillian Murphy is best known for his role as Tommy Shelby in Peaky Blinders. You would also recognize him as the lead actor in the movie Oppenheimer. He was talking about, in one of his interviews, what a miracle a well-produced, well-written, well-acted movie or television show actually was. The fact that any movie or television show comes together in his mind, in his experience as an actor, is in and of itself a miracle. And yet, it's even more rare when all of those elements combine to produce a masterpiece. I am now 3 seasons into The Boys, the dark comedy that follows the lives of a bunch of people who are chasing after superheroes on Amazon Prime. It's based on a graphic novel, and it had an interesting history. It was supposed to be made into, I believe, a series of movies. And Adam McKay was attached to it. So when you hear the name Adam McKay and you think to yourself, all of the movies that he's made, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Step Brothers, those types of movies, that the show would probably have been more in the vein of the comedy than it would of the action or the drama. But that's not what happened. It ended up not working out, and it was one of those shows that ended up going into production hell. It had a bunch of ideas, it had a bunch of people associated with it, but because of creative differences, they couldn't get together. They couldn't come together and actually get the show produced. They couldn't get it shot. Eventually, Cinemax got involved. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg got involved, and they were able to get something put together such that Amazon Studios ended up attaining the rights and was willing to publish their vision. And the reason why I go into all of this is that the show isn't what you would expect it to be. One of the reasons why I was reluctant to watch this show for so long is because I didn't want to watch another superhero show. I don't want to see another superhero movie. The whole thing is a tired trope in my mind, and I think it's been well overdone, and I don't think that there's a lot of storylines that you could follow that would be compelling. Regardless of what drama you try to create in any of these superhero shows or superhero movies, the whole existential threat, the crisis that the superheroes have to address and overcome, saving the world, how many times can there be a threat to planet Earth before it just starts to get boring, before it starts to get rote or routine? That's what's so clever about The Boys. For any of you who haven't started watching it, there is no existential threat to planet Earth outside of the superheroes themselves. That's the twist on the show. It's not just that the superheroes are the threat, it's that they're part of a corporatized, a privatized service. So you have a corporation, in this case they name this corporation Vought, and that corporation has the rights to the superheroes. Not only their services, being able to perform all these supernatural acts, but also their likeness rights. So part of the entire universe of the show is the superheroes and the way that they're marketed. Their presence on social media, their presence on legacy media, in television and in movies. And like anything that we see on social media or on the television or in movies, it's all fake. So their persona is fake so that the public will continue to buy into the need for superheroes as part of the fabric of society. We're all in danger. We need to be saved. Through that lens, you then see the interpersonal lives of these superheroes and how having superpowers in this modern and natural world, most of them are monsters. Because most of them are monsters, there are a group of people, not only civilians, but within the bureaucratic infrastructure of the government, the FBI, the CIA, that are working to bring down the supes. Yes, soup is the slang word for superhero, and the writers do a very good job of creating a colloquial universe, a universe that seems like it would be real and modern. You'd have to have slang around the entire superhero environment. The writing in the show is excellent. The production values in the show are excellent. The special effects are excellent. But what really makes the show is the acting and the actors. The show isn't one that you would naturally look at and be drawn into because of the compelling acting and storylines. It's a superhero show. You're going to see superhero shit happen. And yet, the actors really pull off all of the superhero events, the action, but it's the interplay between these characters that really make the show. And all of the actors are excellent. I'll admit to you, dear listener, that the first couple of episodes, I wasn't immersed in the universe because of all the costumes. I thought the costumes looked fucking goofy. And in a way, I still think that they look goofy. But because I'm now 3 seasons into the show, I'm starting to recognize that it's very well part of the commentary that the showrunners and the producers wanted to make about the superhero universe, that there's this goofiness to it, and yet that's part of what's embraced by the public. Not just the public in the universe of the show, but us, the public, us, the consuming public in the real world. That there's this underlying goofiness to all of the superhero genre, and yet we buy into it hook, line, and sinker, and do so rather quickly, whether or not it's actually well produced and polished, or it's a steaming pile of shit. I think the most marquee name that I recognized was Carl Urban, and you may not remember Carl Urban, but he did an excellent job in another type of dark comedy, graphic novel superhero movie called Judge Dredd. It was the remake from the disaster that was the Sylvester Stallone late 80s, early 90s movie. And in that remake, which was done very well, he did something that's not easy to pull off in a universe that could be perceived as being pretty goofy. He gave a rock solid, a steady performance as this Judge Dredd, as this judge, jury, and executioner in this post-apocalyptic world. The seasons are 8 episodes each, and there's 4 seasons now. I believe the 4th season just came out. And my understanding, which is confirmed by the Wikipedia, is that there will be a 5th and final season. The episodes are about an hour long. Some of them are a little bit longer than an hour. And unfortunately, because I don't pay the extra fee, there are commercials. And I know most of you probably don't pay the extra fee either. So you do have to suffer through commercials during this show. But believe me, if I can do it, any one of you can do it. The last thing I'm going to say about the show, which for some of you could be a deal breaker, is that the show was based on a graphic novel, and it was a dark graphic novel. So the violence in the show is realistic. I've heard a lot of people say that the show is gory or that it's overly violent, but given the universe of the show with a bunch of superheroes, and you could take this for any of the superhero genres, whether it's Marvel or DC or any one of the characters in that universe. You see violence all the time in these superhero movies, and it's completely and totally sanitized. You see things that would happen, and it would do things to the human body, and the movies just don't show it. These television shows just don't show it because it would get a rating that would disqualify 50, if not 60% of the market that they're chasing after. They're going after 13-year-olds. They're going after 12-year-olds. They want a PG or a PG-13 rating at worst. So you don't see the violence. You don't see the blood. And in this show, The Boys, you do. You see all of the consequences of what a superhero would do to human beings if all of those powers were unleashed, were exhibited. I would say I have a pretty high tolerance for this type of programming, for this type of, we'll say it, gore. And there are moments in the show that have me wincing. So be forewarned, this is a graphic television program. You're seeing in graphic detail the consequences of what would happen if superhero powers were unleashed on people. I find it an endearing part of the television program, not an off-putting part. I do believe that it's probably comically overdone in some pieces or some portions of the show, but that's part of the effect of the show. That's part of the look of the show or the stylized way they want to present the superhero genre. 2 superheroes fighting in downtown Manhattan is going to have significant human consequences, and this show isn't afraid to represent as much. You still have a month left in summer, and if you don't like baseball, folks, don't tell me there's anything on television worth watching better than The Boys on Amazon Prime. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.